Cause bitch, I'm the bomb like tick, tick. Yeah.
What's going on, everybody? It's Sheen Jamal, and you're tuned in to Lunchroom Weekly. If you haven't already, make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and click on that little notification bell that's going to let you know when new videos drop. I had the opportunity to go see MJ the Musical on Broadway. A friend of mine had a free extra ticket, and so I gleefully threw my shoes on and jetted to the Neil Simon Theater to watch this production. Everyone knows I'm an MJ fanatic. I did my senior project on Michael Jackson in 2010. I know, right? So far ago. And I donated all proceeds to the Heal the World Foundation. I really enjoyed the set design and the costuming. I just really enjoyed the dazzle of it all. It was so interactive, especially the intro. And I don't want to give away too much for those who haven't seen it, but the intro to the musical was unlike anything that I've seen before. And I can just appreciate the creativity that went into that as far as the set design and costuming. When the pieces were moving on, off and on the stage, they were happening so seamlessly to the point where you couldn't even sometimes realize that the scene had changed. And I think that is just what Broadway is all about. They glossed over certain controversies that have carried misconceptions about MJ, especially within the commercial mainstream world. This includes his skin condition, the abuse that he dealt with as a child from his father, and also the addiction that he had to painkillers. But there were other controversies that they made sure to steer clear from, such as the child molestation trial that took place within the same time frame that this musical was slated to have taken place in. They stated that the scene for this was a rehearsal in 1992 that was supposedly happening in Los Angeles. And we know that there are obviously fictional elements to the musical that I will dissect a little later. Because this was in the 1992-1993 range, I do think that they should have at least mentioned it, and specifically for this period of time. I think that all of the MJs really delivered and did a good job. The younger MJ stole the show for me. He and the mother, who was also double dutying for a background singer, they really delivered such a heartwarming "I'll be there." It was probably the best moment of the entire production for me. It was so rattling, and the casting, everything was just superb. The middle MJ, I can't get it off my brain. When they did Dancing Machine, I mean, he literally went off. And I can just appreciate the fact that clearly these MJs that were casted had done their research and done their homework as far as how MJ moved and how he would execute his steps. Miles Frost, the main MJ, I really can appreciate how he carried throughout the production. I would have liked to see his presentation a little bit more messy. It was too put together. Michael Jackson's hair was very rarely packaged together. It was kind of messy, hanging everywhere here and there. And while we're here, switching gears, I just want to talk about some of the other things that I analyzed throughout the musical. As I mentioned, this takes place in 1992, a rehearsal that supposedly happened in LA. Now, I do want to point out that for the Dangerous World Tour, MJ actually never brought this show to Los Angeles. MTV was given behind the scenes access for a portion of the tour. However, that happened in Europe. There was a brief moment where two rappers appeared on stage during Black or White. They weren't acknowledged, nor were they given any sort of credit in the program, so I have no real idea who they were supposed to be. They missed the mark with the song list. Now, for the most part, they did a pretty good job with balancing the old and the popular MJ songs. However, they missed certain songs that he also was performing during this era that were pretty pivotal to MJ's success during this period, which was The Way You Make Me Feel, Remember the Time, Dirty Diana, and Leave Me Alone, which would have almost fit damn near perfectly with the storyline that they decided to run with for this musical. Personally, I think that the musical would have fared better to serve in the 1995-1996 era of MJ, which was the History World Tour era, because at this point he had beaten the allegations that were brewing about him and the child molestation situation that started around this time, around 1993. And he ended up settling out of court, which was well over $20 million, which we didn't discover until later down the line. But this controversy nonetheless was very much embedded within the pain and suffering that MJ was dealing with around this time. They did briefly touch base on the addiction that MJ had to painkillers and exactly how it started, which was the Pepsi accident. However, they did not state that the whole third leg of the tour, the Dangerous World Tour, was canceled so that way Michael Jackson can go to rehab for the painkillers. So although the tour was successful, it did not complete as it was originally slated to. I understand that the choreographer of this play, which was Christopher Wilden, that I'm going to get into in a second, I understand that he was trying to be inspired by the abstractness of MJ, but this was not MJ abstract that I was watching. This was a attempt at giving us something abstract, but it just wasn't the level of abstract that Michael Jackson presented, especially in terms of showmanship and execution of choreography. Michael Jackson did a lot more than the footwork that they pretty much had Miles doing the entire duration and pelvic thrust. Michael Jackson was an exquisite dancer. He was trained in waving, popping, gliding, and a lot of other street styles that weren't even touched throughout the musical. Now, the choreographer Christopher Wilden comes from a ballet background, so that would pretty much explain why he wouldn't have been able to deliver the grit that I feel was missing. There were other choreographers who they could have reached out to lend a hand to this production that are still alive, including Lavelle Smith Jr., who worked with MJ very closely in the Dangerous World Tour era. There's also Travis Payne, who worked with Michael Jackson on This Is It. Jeffrey Daniel and also Barry Lather, who also worked with MJ's younger sister, Janet Jackson, and worked with MJ on live performances. Now, as far as Janet was concerned, we all know that Michael and Janet were extremely close to one another, and Michael Jackson often drew on Janet Jackson for inspiration as far as his staging and his choreography was concerned, especially around this time. They did not mention any of this during the musical. They mentioned LaToya and Janet's name approximately one time. They did have Stranger in Moscow a part of the set list, which debuted in 1993 after the Super Bowl, which they also did a brief segment of the Super Bowl. Now, I do want to mention that the Stranger in Moscow show was the same show that they had to reschedule because MJ fainted beforehand. So like I said, there were other controversies that plagued this tour. The tour dealt with a lot of problems. For instance, Michael Jackson dealing with a viral infection throughout the tour. He was plagued with health problems, banned by authorities in certain places such as Dubai, Indonesia, and South Korea. And as I mentioned earlier, the last half of the tour was canceled because he went to rehab for the painkillers. Some of Michael Jackson's most iconic and memorable dance breaks and moves were also left out. And I'm not sure if it had to do with the rights to do some of these original choreographies, but I would have loved to see some actual breaks, dance breaks that MJ delivered throughout this period of time. The proceeds in the play were going to heal the world, which is true. In real life, the proceeds did go to heal the world, but they didn't have Heal the World as a part of the set list, which I thought was pretty weird. they did not even touch the surface of his love and admiration for James Brown, which Michael Jackson stated throughout his career was one of his greatest inspirations. I do want to point out some interesting facts as well. When the Pepsi accident happened, Michael Jackson was 25, 4 months, and 29 days old. Approximately 25 years, 4 months, and 29 days later, Michael Jackson will have died from a painkiller overdose. John Braca and John McClane are attorneys from Michael Jackson's estate, his estate in which his family actually hates and does not get along with, which would explain why his family seems to not have had any hand in the creation of this musical. When Michael Jackson passed, he was $500 million in debt. Throughout this duration of time, his family also were fighting with the estate based off of the fact that they felt that they forged MJ's will, the last will that he supposedly had written, which was in 2002, but his family proclaimed that Michael was in New York at the proposed time that the will was said to have been signed. It's also interesting to state that every single member of the Jackson 5 family, except for the mom and dad, signed this letter stating that they felt the will had been forged. Overall, I do feel the show was worth watching. I do feel that if you have the money or the resource to see the show, that you should. But this also points to the fact of why we need more blacks and new creatives in the theater world as well, because there are certain elements that were missed, certain key elements that made Michael Jackson even more of a unique performer than what was showcased during this 2-hour production. And Michael Jackson's life was anything short of a sweet, sugary thing like what was presented to us, but instead had edge, had grit, had hardship, and I would have loved to see those things explored a little bit more. That concludes my review. If you went and saw the show, drop some comments underneath and tell me what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Did you like the show? Did you not like the show? Make sure you like this video and subscribe to this channel. I'm Sheen Jamal. Peace.